I was listening to a podcast this week, and they were talking about marriage, and one of the things the pastor had to say about marriage is, in this quote, is Chris Valaton, and he said, if you love your spouse as much on the days you don't like it as those you do, you'll probably have a good marriage. And he was saying that there's going to be times when you get married that your spouse gets on your nerves, or there's times when you're filled with love and everything seems good and everything seems wonderful, and then there's other times where it's not quite so peaches and cream. And his point was that you kind of have to be stable. Like when you go into marriage, you can't let your emotions and how you feel in every given circumstance determine how you treat your spouse during every given circumstance. And it tied in kind of beautifully with a thought process I've been having as we've had all this really good news as far as Daylight Church about just kind of staying grounded and centered and being careful about how we move forward and what we put our faith in and what we put our confidence in, because there's some good stuff happening. But the author of Philippians says this. He says, I've learned. So you've all seen the bumper sticker, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And a lot of times it's a dude deadlifting or something like that, right? It's God can give me the strength to do anything I want. But this is the context of that passage. He was saying basically sometimes life stinks and sometimes life is great. And I've learned the secret of being content, as he says. He says, I've learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need, and finding contentment in all those situations. And that's when he says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. This thing of being kind of stable, of being faithful in the good times and the bad, it's a gift from God. And I want to make sure as we talk about these great things that are happening, that somehow we recognize that God is the same when our church is booming and new stuff is happening and new people are joining and we've got popcorn in our bellies and times when we don't know where we're going to get our nursery workers from that week. There's good times and bad in a church. And sometimes during the bad times, we have this tendency to rely on God heavily. We lean on God and say, God, we need you. Where are you? Help us out here. We get on our face before God and we expect and we search for God. And then when things are going good, we kind of have the opposite response. We think, everything's just fine. I don't need God anymore. And I want to make sure as we progress as a church and as we grow as a church that we maintain that diligence. We have this idea that when things are bad that we're turning towards God, and then when things are good, it's look at what I have created. I have made fire. And it's so important that when great things are happening that we don't beat our chest and say, look what we have created. I just think as we move forward, we want to. There's some really spectacular things, and we're talking about those things. There's two major things going on right now, and I just want us to stay grounded and humble and dependent. We have a new building that's paid off. That's nothing compared to who God is and what God does. We have a new church joining us. That's nothing compared to who God is and what God does. We have to remain reliant. We have to remain humble, and never come to this decision that look what I have created, or look what we have created, or look what we have done. We've done nothing. We've submitted, and God has done everything. And I just think it's so important that we stay that way. But there are two things that we have to talk about. And so the sermons for the next few weeks, I admitted to my friend Mike Hawk over lunch this week that I'm a little concerned because I'm spending a lot of time over at the new church busting out ceilings and hanging light fixtures and cleaning floors and all that kind of stuff. And most of the time I have some good time to meditate during the weeks. I take long showers and think and pray, and a lot of that time's getting sucked up right now. So I'm a little scared that these sermons are just going to be terrible for about 5 or 6 weeks or 5 months or whatever it takes. And so mercy towards me, please, during this time. But there are things we have to talk about. There's a lot of logistics involved, but it does tie into the ministry of who we are as a church and what we do. And so it's important that we tackle them. And the first we're going to talk about is where we're at on the new church building. And this, as you can see, we've cleaned out the ceiling, cleaned off the drop ceiling, and we've probably very dangerously hung live lights from cables that have no business holding them. But we're making progress. And then Hope Culture, they're having their last church service together today. So they're having a celebration and serving communion, and they're dissolving, and they will be here next week. So we should see a pretty good influx of people starting next week. And we need to talk about what does that mean. And I've had a lot of people asking me questions about, well, what does this merger mean? What does it mean about this and so forth? And we're going to talk about that today. I wanted to tell you a little bit about our financial campaign going. If you didn't get to see the sermon from last week, we spelled out exactly where the money is coming from and what we need. And we have some benevolent donors that are giving $550,000 to Daylight Church, and they've paid for the building, and they're paying for $110,000 of the remodel. but we need to raise $74,000 to kind of meet our dream as far as getting the facility where we want it to be. And so if we can raise that 74, we have it free and clear and exactly where we want it to be. And this is what we've raised thus far in about a week and a half, which is pretty spectacular. We've raised about $20,000, 19,000, and that's worth some applause there. 19 grand in a week and a half is pretty spectacular. So if you go on the fundraising website, you're going to see that 15,000 figure, but we also have received checks totaling 4,000, and we don't want to plug that into the campaign because it's a 3% fee to do that, and that's pretty substantial. And so I'll just keep giving you the updates up here. But it's pretty exciting. We've and I'll tell you, just as a pastor, I've been so crazy encouraged over the last couple weeks because you guys have shown up and owned this thing. Some of you have made what I know were painful donations to this campaign fund, and so thank you for what you're doing. But then on Saturdays, we're having work days, and we see those going on for the foreseeable future. So if you have Saturday mornings from 9 to noon is what we pitch them as, if you can make them at all. Next week, we're going to be prying off part of the drop ceiling that's just around the edge that we have to ditch before we can paint the ceiling and so forth. So there's just a ton of work to do. The bathrooms need to be scrubbed and painted. The kitchen needs to have the tile ripped up. There's plenty to do. But we've had a lot of people show up. And so here's just an example of what was accomplished in just a couple hours with enough people. So this is going to be the youth building, and this is what it looked like a couple hours later. And you're not seeing the big picture here because there's a wall there that was torn down. So you can see that wall was torn down. And then beyond that was a snack bar in the pavilion outside that was all ripped down. It was just a ton of work. And there was, like when the walls fell, there was literal cheering. I mean, people were, look what we have created. But it's been a lot of fun. If you've been there, you know that this has been a lot of fun. And there's something unifying about working together and just owning this thing. And so I would encourage you, show up, and in a moment I'll tell you how you can get more involved with that. But here's what we've accomplished in, 2 weeks, a week and a half, something like that? When did we close? We closed one Friday ago, so 10 days ago, and we've already done all this. The drop ceiling has been removed. I want to thank Amy and Ronnie Mills specifically for all the work they've done. Ronnie has spent, and Ronnie and Chris Booker last Sunday said, hey, can we get the keys? And I said yes, and they took it. And I'll bet Ronnie has spent 30 hours on this thing in the last 10 days. I mean, he's just in there working constantly, and Chris spent all day with him and organizing and sorting and doing what needs to be done. The drop ceiling's been removed. The coffee bar's been opened up. That was pretty interesting because we were removing the drop ceiling, and there was this, it was like an outdoor roof over the coffee bar inside. And I put my foot on it to reach something, and it went, and I found out that it was attached to the walls and the sides and suspended by 2 cables. And it was probably 200 pounds worth of wood. I mean, it was something ridiculous. And so we ripped all that out, got it all out of there. We've sold a bunch of stuff just on Facebook Marketplace. So we're actually in the positive right now for cash flow because we're not spending anything except we've got a dumpster for $350. So we're up about $600 so far. So that's golden. The youth outbuilding you saw has been gutted. The snack bar was torn down. We've had 3 people. Stu McRae is back here. Stu's shown up with a chainsaw both Saturdays and spent all kinds of time, and Paul and Ryan Engler. So we're ripping down trees, and I don't think I have any pictures of that in here, but they're all on Instagram, they're all on Facebook, so you can check those out. But these guys are working hard. Hours and hours of organizing, like I mentioned. And Joey Medcraft, where's Joey? Joey was the guy that ripped out the snack bar, so thanks for that, man. And we've gotten ceiling paint quotes, so we're painting it all black. It'll be an open ceiling with spiral air ducts, and it's going to be quite nice and modern looking and beautiful. And we're starting to get quotes on that. We're working on graveling. My buddy who is a contractor in Texas is sending his guy. He wants to make sure we get treated right, so he's flying his guy up from Texas to do the gravel work for us, which is fantastic. And light destroyed. We had a light that blew up and flames shot everywhere. That was fun. And we ate our first meal together. So Ryan Engler prepared a barbecue dinner for us, and those that showed up and worked got free food. So that was pretty nice. So thanks for that. So thanks, guys. Everything you've done has been awesome. If you want to know how to stay involved, and so you can contribute. So if you go to mydaylightchurch.com, there's this tab that says Help Remodel Our New Location. And you click on that. The link to the campaign for financial contributions is buried in there. You just hit it, and it'll send you off to our chuffed.org account, which is the worst name ever, but also the cheapest one to use. So that's pretty great. But if you're interested in knowing more, so there's people who will show up on Saturdays, and you'll see that in a general email every week is, hey, we're having a work day on Saturday. But some people are saying, hey, give me the keys, I want to go work. hey, can I go paint this? Hey, can I go do that? And I'm saying, yes, here's the keys. And so if you want to be a person who's like on the inside track of this thing and wants to know every single time somebody's doing something, go to this same tab and there's a place where you can enter your contact information, and that'll just put you in the database, meaning you'll know when something's going on. Or if you want to contribute, if you say, hey, I've got 3 hours on Thursday afternoon that I'd like to go over and do some work, then you just let us know. But that's the way to get in on that circle, is to do that. Also, I want to encourage you. I mentioned last week that you can go through on your Facebook account. So if we rely just on the people in the room, odds are we're never going to come close to our goal because finances are limited. But we all know people who like to invest in humanitarian service and Christian organizations, right? And so what I did over the last 10 days is I started alphabetically. I found a way to alphabetize all my friends, and I started in the A's, and it alphabetizes by first name for some reason, and I just started in the A's. And I wrote them a personalized little note, just said, hey, how's life going? Asked about the kids in soccer camp or whatever, just to make sure they know this isn't just a total copy and paste, and said, hey, I thought you might be interested in what we're doing. Here's a link. And I sent them a link to our campaign. And I got it through the C's this week. I got A, B, C, I got done, and I raised $1,700 in the last 10 days just by going through A through C. And that's not an applause for me. It's to say this thing works. There are people who will make contributions. And so, that may just drive you crazy and say, I could never do that. That's okay. But if you could, I spent 4 hours on this and raised $1,700. That's a good return investment on time. And so if you wanted to do that, just go through on your friends list and say, hey, just wanted to send you a link. No pressure. But some people will give, and that will help us get where we need to be. Also, YWAM Louisville, this was pretty fantastic because I got to them. Their manager, their president, is Andy. His name's Andy. And so when I got to his name in the A's, I skipped him because they're a missions organization, and I didn't want to ask for money from a missions organization because we would prefer to send money to missions organizations. But he found our campaign online, and they made a $2,000 investment in what we're doing. So $2,000 of that $19,000 came from them. And so if you get a chance, look them up and just send them a phone call or a text or something, or an email saying thank you. But people want to give. He said, we saw your campaign. I took it to my leadership team, and they said, we really want to do something substantial. And they did. And so you'll be surprised at who wants to give. So please consider doing that. All right, that's enough on the building. And we won't do financial updates and financial begging through this whole process, but we do want to keep you guys informed, and it's been a couple weeks since you've heard anything. Let's talk about this merger thing. Hope Culture Church, it meets in the Melwood Arts Center. So since we announced that there was a merger, I've had all kinds of questions, and I know you guys are wondering the really super important stuff, like once we merge, will I still be able to sit in movie seats, and will I still be able to eat popcorn, and the stuff that's really on your heart. I understand it, and those are the kind of questions I'm getting, and don't panic, all will be well. That's the question I'm getting about the new building is, will we have movie seats? And we won't. That's where the $74,000 is going in. We're having reclining massaging seats that put a $5 bill in your pocket when you leave. And so they're going to be fantastic. It's going to be wonderful. But I just wanted to go, I tried to come up with like a frequently asked questions, assuming what you guys would ask and kind of basing that on what other people have been asking. And what does it mean that we're merging? So there's all kinds of different types of mergers among churches. There's churches that would be considered a peer relationship where they come in and the lead pastor of one church and the lead pastor of the other church become co-pastors, and they start an organization under this, that's kind of under the umbrella of both organizations. Sometimes they rebrand and rename, and sometimes they don't. This one's called a dissolution and donation is what's occurring in this particular church merger, which means Hope Culture is dissolving completely and stopping services and moving on, and their pastor is resigning from ministry. If you get the chance, go to Hope Culture's website, and right now what you're going to see is this. That's what's on their main page, is we are joining Daylight Church. And there's about a 5-minute video on there that talks about why they're making this decision. But the short of it is the pastor, Craig Johnson, determined in September that he was not okay. Pastoring is very challenging, and he's had some really, really hard challenges. And ultimately, it started eating into his family life and his relationship with his wife and his relationship with his children and the time he got to spend with them, because he was bivocational. So he was spending about 50 hours a week working a sectarian job and then also pastoring a church. And so he was spending all day Saturdays doing sermon prep and every evening with meetings with his staff and meetings with people and counseling people, and got to the point where the only time he was seeing his kids was over dinner. And he was very transparent about all of this last Sunday. You can see the whole sermon still on their website and their archive if you want to see it. But ultimately, he decided, I'm not okay, and he needed a long sabbatical. He needed what he called an indefinite sabbatical. He just needed to step away from ministry for a while. And because he wasn't sure how long that period would be, he didn't think it would be fair to say, hey, keep me on staff, pay me, or whatever, and keep going with Hope. So he just decided to step down completely. And then the question became, could the church survive without him? And their leadership team talked about it quite a bit and ultimately decided the best thing for them to do would be to join another church that Craig recommended. And Craig and I have become very close friends. And we've always talked about, I've always said, if Daylight crashes and burns, I'm going to Hope Culture. And he's always said, if Hope Culture crashes and burns, I'm going to Daylight. And we're super excited about working together and working closely. He's going to do absolutely nothing for 6 months, and he's not wired to do that. So we'll probably say, all right, Craig, back off, man. You're not working here, right? Don't just chill, relax, right? Because he's a hard worker and a go-getter. But they're going to dissolve, which means they're donating all of their resources to Daylight Church, and they're requesting a donation of all their people to Daylight Church. So they're encouraging all their people to come and attend Daylight Church, whether they do or not. That's the encouragement. And we have no idea. People are asking, how many people do they run? They run about what we run on a Sunday morning. Maybe slightly less recently, but maybe 80 adults, 70 adults on a Sunday morning plus kids. Lots and lots of 3-year-olds, which we're going to talk about here in just a moment. But about 70 adults. And so even if half show up next Sunday, we can expect an influx of about 50 people that will be showing up between kids and adults, which is a pretty big jump. But that's what it's going to look like. Oh, and that was what the question was what does this mean? How does it affect Daylight leadership? It doesn't affect it at all. It's a dissolution and donation, which means Daylight leadership stays exactly the same as it has. I'm still the lead pastor. My staff is still the staff. Now, here's where it may help us is there may be some areas like on sound and light, for example, where we have a bunch of people like Chris Booker, and Andrew Lutz is here today, and you'll see Andrew jumped up to handle the computer because Rusty had to go run youth. We may have an influx of people who can start to lead in those positions and start to make a real difference in some areas that we have some serious needs. So there may be some changes around here as far as who's operating what and who's doing what, but as a core, we are Daylight Church and we will remain Daylight Church, but we're inviting Hope Culture to come and be part of our family and to join us. How does it affect our finances, people have asked? I only see good stuff. When you grow as a church, the zeros at the end start to become larger, but I don't think it's that kind of growth where we're going to have to immediately put in additional staff or anything like that. Basically, we're going to have a new pool of people who hopefully eventually will be donating. They are encouraging their people to donate through the end of the year to get all their debts paid off and to have good closure to their church. And so even the people who show up next week, we're going to encourage them not to give an our offering, but to continue to give to Hope so they can close off and make sure everything is handled. We'll also be inheriting a bunch of resources that are just going to be spectacular for our new building. They have had a fixed facility for a long time, and so things like sound dampening panels that we're going to need on the walls, they've already built. They took doors and put sound panels on them, and we'll paint them and stick them up at the new building. And they have Edison bulbs, just crazy amounts of Edison bulbs that we'll be using in our open ceiling plan. And they have $30,000 worth of coffee making stuff, and a good sound. They have the exact same soundboard we have, only twice the size. And so there's going to be some really nice stuff that we're going to inherit that's really going to help us move forward and make a big difference. And so it's going to be excellent. Somebody was asking me, and I received probably one of the most encouraging things I've ever received in my life this week. Somebody was asking how the other church responded because I was there last Sunday, and it was a bomb that was dropped on them. A lot of them had no idea this thing was happening. But Craig got up and he introduced me, and we talked and bantered for a little while, and then he got up and he talked about his struggles as a pastor and what the final decision of the organization was, and ultimately, and then we had a town hall that night where myself and our staff went over and introduced ourselves and did a Q&A with them, and they asked really good questions like, what does HL stand for? And I told them Hannibal Lecter, and they thought that was really funny, and I told him huge lymph nodes. Sorry, there's that voice. Stop. But in general, it really felt like everybody received it really well. Like they felt for him. They got it as to what was going on and how challenging it has been. And there were a bunch of people that came to me and said, we'll be there, we're excited. There were some people, and I felt bad for these people, they had come to Daylight for a while, and then they went to Hope Culture, and now they're being told to go back to Daylight, which I'm like, sorry about that, dude. But that's just how it is. But they acted excited about it, and so that was nice. But the person who asked me this question this week said this, and she said, how did it go with them? Because if the roles were reversed, I would be devastated. And I know some of you are like, really? Somebody likes Daylight that much? But that was super encouraging to me, and it's a reality that the people who are going to come in next week are leaving behind something that they loved. If they're at Hope Culture now, because Hope Culture has had kind of a roller coaster ride, if they're there because they wanted to be there, and they'll be here next week. So I want us to keep that in mind as we approach them. You're asking questions like, can I still sit in row H and seat 15 each week at the theater? And my answer to that is, don't be a butthead. When you throw a bunch of people in the mix, it changes dynamics, but this is what we're looking for. And in just a few moments, I'm going to share why this thing is important and powerful. And it may require some adaptation. And if you're going to mix it up with other people, it may mean that your small groups look a little bit different from here on. It may mean that you've got people that you barely even know serving coffee with you of a Sunday morning. But this is important stuff. And it's different than if a visitor came and joined us. These are people who had a family that are now joining our family, and we want to make them feel integrated and part of what we're doing, which may mean stepping aside. It may mean I no longer sit in seat 8, row 8, and I have no idea who's in H15, if anybody, today. I knew it was a bad idea when the theater put letters. I thought, oh no, that's just terrible. But so no, you cannot still sit there next week is the answer.
Don't be Sunday's worst.
Yeah, don't be Sunday's worst, right? Are we ready for this? Kind of. So here's the biggest logistical concern. They are a young congregation. If you look around the room, average 28, 25. I mean, they're 20 and 35. They're young people. And they have a lot of toddlers. I think when we did our town hall, didn't they say there were 11 kids or something like that in the nursery? And that was the town hall where only half the people were there. And so the nursery is the huge concern right now, which is why I put a subtle plug early on in the sermon about nursery workers. We're going to need help in the nursery. And so if you're already a nursery worker, just please understand that over the next few weeks, we may have to ask more of you than we typically do. And we apologize for that, but it's a logistical thing that we really don't know how to overcome because we don't have their people yet. And ultimately, we're going to ask their nursery workers to join in. And we're talking about separating the nursery into 3 through 5 and making it easier by separating into groups. But we don't know. Next week, we may have 20 people show up. We may have 80 people show up, and we have no way of gauging that currently. So we're just asking everybody to stay open. If you're here and we have to come to you and say, hey, can you work nursery today? Just please be flexible. Flexible is flexible, only slightly different. Is what? Plexiglass, right. Be whatever that word was. Be that thing. And just say yes if we say we need you to work. And the question may come up of what can I do? And I thought of 3 areas that you can help. And one is just to celebrate. Just recognize that this is a good thing that's going to create some, I don't even want to say challenges. It's just going to create some differences. There will be people sitting in your seats when you arrive next Sunday. And just be flexible or whatever it is. So be friendly. Be celebratory about this thing. And recognize that they are mourning, some of them. And be compassionate. And so I made up a word. Compassio hugoanacolicusness, I think. And it's actually a word, you can look it up. But some of the people that come next week are going to be like feeling us out and already disappointed. We need to be a community that welcomes them with open arms. We need to be a community that welcomes with compassion, with a huggy attitude, but not real hugs. So don't just start hugging people unless they're like weeping and say, will you hug me? Then it's okay to hug them. But anti-cliquishness is also super important. As we have events coming up, it's going to be natural for Daylight Church to want to kind of hang out with Daylight Church and for Hope Culture Church to want to kind of hang out with Hope Culture Church. And we need to break those walls fast. We need to make sure that when they come in, you're sitting with them, you're extending a hand, you're welcoming them, you're getting to know them. And when you have your groups, when you have your events, that you're not sitting with the people that you normally sit with. You might even make it something purposeful that I will not sit where I normally sit next week. Instead, I'm going to come in and see faces I don't recognize. I'm going to sit with them and get to know them. And let's just try to break down those walls rapidly and form a church family quickly. And just so understand people are hurting and be welcoming. I tried to find pictures of people shaking hands online this week, and all of them are like business suits, 2 hands extended, and they're really stupid. And I found this one, and I said, not this, but sort of, because I have no idea what these 2 guys are actually doing. There's something very strange about this picture, but I think they're halfway between a handshake and a hug, which is probably a pretty safe place to be. So I thought of a few areas, a few words that you can use over the next few weeks that'll be helpful, and the first is welcome. Don't come in and sit and observe, but be proactive. Is next week, before service, show up a little bit early. Oh, I know, it's terrible. I'm sorry to ask such a horrendous thing. Show up a little bit early and see faces you don't recognize and say welcome and extend a hand. Stay a little bit late and talk to people, okay? Join us, meaning, hey, we're doing this on Thursday night, or hey, we've got our Saturday work group. Would you come? One of the most, they'll teach you in church growth that the way to know someone has been integrated or assimilated is that their name appears in 5 new people's cell phones. Meaning 5 new people have gotten their name and number and are texting them, are communicating with them. That's one of the best ways that you can grow a church. Is that principle alone will blow up a church, is when everybody is meeting everyone and connecting outside of church walls. And so say join us. We're going out to eat after lunch or after the service. Would you come and join us? My treat is the next one is, let's do a meal together. Let's hang out. And let me cover it. And let's be a generous family welcoming a family. Okay. Tell me, meaning tell me about yourself. Let me learn about you. This is just a great tip for life in general, is learn to be a good conversationalist. And good conversationalists are people who ask great questions. Tell me who you are. Tell me about your history. Tell me about your life. What do you enjoy? What's fun? Where have you traveled? Where have you enjoyed? And so forth. What's your favorite food in Louisville? All this stuff. It's actually way more powerful than it sounds. It's just to let people talk about themselves. And then finally, I am not a robot. Don't do any of this robotically. So don't come up and say, hey, are you from Hope Culture? I'm HL. Nice to meet you. Where are you from? Just make it real. Just like don't do it because I put it on the screen. Do it because we're human beings receiving other human beings. And so let's just be a warm church. So what's the benefit of all this? Like why even merge churches? Why invite another family to join ours? I had the great privilege just recently of sitting on a roundtable discussion brainstorming group about a pretty large organization that's looking at their entire structure top down. And they're saying, what do we get rid of? What do we build? What do we do? How do we handle our money? I mean, it's an overhaul of a large organization. And it was just a brainstorming session between people. And one of the questions that came up was, what is our mission? What is the mission statement of this organization? Because the mission statement of the organization determines what you do. So if your mission is to benefit seniors through dance, and somebody says, so you're having dance events for senior citizens, and somebody says, hey, do you want to have a hot dog bar? You say, no, I don't want to have a hot dog bar because we do dance for seniors, which is the weirdest illustration I've ever said in my life from up here. But the point is, once you know the mission, then you know kind of what you do. Like what is the reason determines the activity. And so why is this important for our mission? And what is it about Daylight Church? Why would we want to invite another church to come join us? And you may know our pillars are service, study, worship, and rest. And I think apart from rest, which is kind of a very strange pillar to have anyway, all of these are pronounced with more people. A worship session when there's a lot of people in the room loving Jesus, there's something attractive about that to people who have maybe never experienced worship before. When it comes to study in our small groups and our communication and so forth, when it comes to service projects especially, more hands makes light work. I mean, the more hands we have, the more people on board, the more that gets done. But then that begs the question, what is our real mission? And this is the documented mission statement of Daylight Church, is that we help people become followers of Jesus through service, study, worship, and rest. And so I wanted to close today with this idea that the pillars are the product of and the progression toward the purpose. So when we say, who are we as a church, and we say service, study, worship, rest, which we're getting rid of these ugly, crooked pillars finally, what is our purpose? Our purpose is not service, study, and worship and rest. The purpose is helping people become followers of Jesus. Service, study, and worship and rest are the progression towards that, and then what outflows out of that. It's circular. So when you're a follower of Jesus, service comes naturally. When you're a follower of Jesus, worship comes naturally. So the goal isn't that people serve or that people worship or that people rest. The goal is that Jesus becomes the all in all. That Jesus becomes everything in the lives of people. And then as that occurs, that these four pillars kind of undergird people's lives. Service, study, and worship and rest become parts of people's lives. And as you participate in or allow those four pillars into your life, it does a circular thing where now you're closer to Jesus and more connected with him, and it builds on itself. And so if you would, grab your mobile devices and turn to, or your Bibles if you've got them with you, and turn to Colossians 1 with me. I want to read this passage about Jesus. So Colossians 1, 15 through 20 says this, and you can read along with me. I'm reading out of the NIV. It's talking about Jesus. It says, "The Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation." And so we teach in here that if you want to know what God looks like, look at Jesus. Jesus is the image of God. Jesus shows you what God is like. It says, "For in him," being Jesus, "all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning and the firstborn from among the dead, so that in everything he might have the supremacy." And this says it again. What does God look like? He looks like Jesus. It says, "God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross." So I started talking about good times or bad, we want to remain centered, and this is where we want to plant our flag. Is during the bad times, we want to recognize that Jesus is king of everything. Jesus is the center of everything we do at Daylight Church. Jesus is the one we look to. Jesus is the one that we want to be like, that we mold our lives to be like, to be conformed to the image of Christ. And I want to make sure that a new building never becomes an idol. I want to make sure that a church growth and people being here and the excitement of that never becomes like our victory cry. That's not our victory cry at all. Our victory cry is, was Jesus made large today? Did Jesus look good in this new facility? Was Jesus highlighted when these new people came in? And did Jesus get to be Jesus? I don't want anything to ever get in the way of that. And I just want to make sure that as we celebrate, we're careful what we celebrate about and what the actual victory is. And hopefully the victory is that people will be united under the banner of Jesus. The psalmist says this, "How good and pleasant it is when God's people live together in unity. It's like precious oil poured on the head." And that's a description of when a king was anointed. There would be a huge celebration. And part of that anointing process is they would pour oil on the new king's head. And then there would be this great celebration all throughout the land that would last for days. And it says when brothers dwell in unity, when brothers and sisters dwell in unity, it's like that moment when everybody's yes, yes, yes. That's the moment. And we get to experience that in here as a new family is coming to join our family. And we get to see that happen. And Jesus on in his last moments, you listen carefully when somebody says their last words, right? Last words are important. And these were some of Jesus' last words at his final dinner with his friends. He's praying to God and he says, "I and them and you and me, so that they may be brought to complete unity. Then the world will know that you sent me and have loved them even as you have loved me." So you'll notice he says, "I pray that you guys will be one as we are one." He says, so as the unity that I have with the Father, Jesus says, I pray that you guys will have that same unity. And why? What is the purpose? He says, so that the world will know you sent me. So that the world will know that they are loved the same way we love one another. And I feel like this thing that's going to happen at Daylight Church when this other family joins our family and we become one family is important. I think Louisville will one day hear about the love of God as a result of these things that are happening, that God is doing, that we're not doing, that we can't do, that's beyond us there's no way we could possibly do some of the things God has done and is doing. But we play a part in this, and it's that unity part. And I encourage you just come in with your goggles on next week, looking for people you don't know, and make sure they feel like part of the family. And if we can do that, whatever happens numbers-wise, whatever happens as far as where we go from here, we've done what God has asked us to do, and it'll be a good thing.